Better thinking, faster decisions, bigger ROI. This is the Finding 12 Minutes podcast. The idea is simple. If you can find 12 minutes of efficiency in your day, you will gain an hour every week, and that changes how we work. Each episode is focused on practical ways to use AI, technology, and smarter strategies to help you move faster, think clearer, and get more done with less effort. So let's find your 12 minutes. So this week, I want to talk about why your product roadmap is not a strategy. For the most part, product roadmaps are just fiction. They're attractive fiction. They have color-coded boxes. There's quarterly milestones. There's feature names. There's delivery dates. They create the appearance of clarity and control. But many of the items in the roadmap are based on assumptions that have not been tested. The customer's needs may have changed since you've come up with the idea. Technologies evolve, particularly when we're thinking about artificial intelligence on how long or how fast those things evolve. And the priorities of leaderships, that may change, or they may reconsider where they are. So the problem is that organizations create these roadmaps, right? So that's really not the problem. The problem is not the roadmap. The problem is that they treat those roadmaps as contracts. Once a feature appears on a roadmap, it becomes a commitment. Once a date is assigned, it becomes a deadline. Once leadership has seen the presentation, changing direction begins to look like failure. That's not when the roadmap stops supporting the strategy and starts preventing it. Today, we want to make the case that your product roadmap is really not your strategy. And it should help you execute your strategy, but it should never replace it. So when we think about strategy, roadmaps, and project plans, those are really three different things that organizations often combine into one document. First, there is strategy. Strategy defines the problem that you're trying to solve, customers or stakeholders that you intend to serve, the position that you want to create, and the choices you're willing to make. The strategy establishes the direction. Right. So when we think about that, right, we start going to that second phase of where the product roadmap is. The roadmap identifies the sequence of problems, opportunities, capabilities, or outcomes that deserve attention. It often connects strategic direction with near-term decisions. The roadmap communicates intent. Pretty simple. Third, when we think about the project plan, so of the three documents that are there, the project plan identifies the tasks, the owners, the dependencies, the resources, the delivery dates, milestones, etc. The project plan manages the execution. While they're related, they're not necessarily interchangeable. Strategy answers, where are we going and why? The roadmap answers, what should we address next? And the project plan answers, who is doing what and when? When organizations combine all three, the product roadmap becomes overloaded. It is expected to communicate strategy, promise future features, assign dates, coordinate teams, satisfy leadership, and reassure customers. No document can do all of that well. So how does the roadmap become dangerous? Well, roadmaps become dangerous when it creates this false sense of certainty. Teams begin to commit to solutions before they fully understand the problem. Leaders begin measuring progress by whether features are delivered rather than whether the outcomes have improved. Organizations start asking questions. Did we ship this feature? Did we hit this date? Did we complete the roadmap? Those questions, while they matter, they're often incomplete. Some more important questions that we should be asking is, did the feature solve the problem? Did the customer behavior change? Did the process improve? Did revenue increase? Did risk decrease? Did we learn enough to justify the next investment? A roadmap filled with features encourages output. Roadmap built around outcomes encourages progress. That's the major difference. We can deliver every feature on the schedule and still fail to create value. We can also change the roadmap, remove planned features, produce far better results. In many organizations, changing the roadmap is treated as poor execution. Teams are rewarded for staying on plan, even when new evidence suggests that the plan is wrong. That is where the roadmap becomes theater. The organization appears disciplined because everyone is following the plan. In reality, may simply be executing an outdated assumption more efficiently. And so when it comes to AI makes the roadmap problem even more visible. AI makes the problem more important in a lot of ways because it can speed up decisions. It can find answers better. AI allows those teams also to prototype ideas faster, generate options, analyze information more quickly, even test concepts with a little initial effort. And while that is valuable, right, but it also creates product assumptions that can be outdated faster. A capability that looks difficult 6 months ago may now be available through an existing platform. A feature that once required significant development may now need to be produced through a configuration or workflow automation. At the same time, an AI initiative that looked promising during a demo may fail when it encounters real data, run up against the wall of your security requirements, inconsistent processes, and this is probably the bigger one of the bunch, is limited user adoption. So imagine an organization with an AI roadmap that says first quarter, launch a chatbot, second quarter, build a knowledge assistant, third quarter, introduce predictive analytics, fourth quarter, automate customer service. That may look like a plan, but it's really just a list of technologies and features. It doesn't tell us which business problems matter the most. It doesn't explain what the outcomes should improve that need to be improved. It doesn't identify which assumptions that need to be tested. It doesn't define what evidence would justify continued investment. The organization may complete all four of these initiatives and still fail to generate measurable value. A better roadmap might focus on reducing customer response time, improving access to institutional knowledge, increasing forecast accuracy, or even removing repetitive administrative work. Those are outcomes, and technology should support the outcomes. Technology should not become the strategy. So what does a better roadmap look like? A useful roadmap should become more specific as the work gets closer. Near-term priorities should be relatively clear because the organization has more information and is prepared to act. Midterm priorities should remain directional because additional learning is still required. And then long-term items should be expressed in strategic themes, problems, or opportunities rather than detailed featured commitments. The further you look into the future, the less precise the roadmap should become. This is not weak planning, it's honest planning. A good roadmap should contain 5 elements. First, what is the desired outcome? What should we improve for the customer, the employee, the project, or the business? Second, the problem should be the opportunity, right? The problem or an opportunity. What's preventing the outcome today? What is our hurdles? What's the pain point? What's the friction? The third is the assumption. What do we currently believe the problem, the user need, the technology, or what is the proposed solution? So what is our assumptions around those? Like if we assume that we are going to add in this chatbot, it's going to solve X. Right? That's where we need to focus on. And then the fourth element is around evidence. And I think this is the most important part. Just because we believe something doesn't necessarily mean that there's evidence to support that. So what information would strengthen or weaken our belief or our assumptions? And then finally, the fifth is the decision. What will we decide once we have the evidence? Notice that I said decision and not delivery date. Delivery date assumes that the solution has already been chosen. A decision date recognizes that additional learning may change the solution, and that distinction is critical. So that kind of moves me into this concept of what we would call an adaptive roadmap. I recommend thinking about the roadmap in a 5-part cycle. You know, what's the direction? What are the near-term priorities? What evidence do we have? What decisions need to be made? What adjustments that we need to make? And then start with direction. What strategic outcome is the organization pursuing? This should be clear enough to guide choices and specific enough to prevent every idea from becoming a priority. The next thing I would focus on is identify those near-term priorities. These should be a few problems or opportunities that deserve attention now. Not everything can be urgent. A roadmap that contains every request is not a roadmap, it's inventory. Next, you want to define the evidence. What must the team learn? What customer behavior, operational data, financial results, technical findings, user feedback, whatever is going to inform the next decision? Right. So then that kind of leads us into the next phase, which is what comes next is really the decision. So based on the evidence, will the organization continue, change, expand, pause, or stop work? I also like to refer to this as, start, stop, go, right? Now, next, later. These are it's all the same concepts that kind of feed into this. And then you need to kind of finally focus on adjustment, right? Just because you said or had the assumption 6 months ago doesn't mean that it still means the same today based on the evidence that you gather. So update the roadmap based on what you've learned. That adjustment is not failure of planning. Its purpose is of planning under uncertainty, right? Direction should remain relatively stable. The priorities may change. The solution will change. The dates will definitely change. The evidence should drive all those changes. And this connects directly to that concept of what we spoke in a previous episode around decision velocity. A strong roadmap does not eliminate decisions by pretending that the future is already known. It creates a structure for making the right decisions at the right time. So tying this back to the whole concept of the 12-minute roadmap, thinking about it from an audit perspective, this is where we can kind of drive in this whole concept of what we can do in 12 minutes. Take one of your current products, technologies, innovations, your AI roadmap, or any roadmap. In the first 2 minutes, identify the primary business outcome the roadmap is supposed to produce. If that outcome is not clear, the roadmap is already in trouble. The next 3 minutes, review every item and ask whether it represents the problem, an outcome, or a predetermined solution. Most roadmaps will contain far more solutions than outcomes. For the next 3 minutes, identify a major assumption around the highest priority item. What must be true for this initiative to create value? Then, in the next 2 minutes, define the evidence that would validate or challenge that assumption. Then you want to use those final 2 minutes to identify the next decision. And it's not the next meeting. It's not the next presentation. It's not the next delivery milestone. It's the next decision. What will leadership or the product team decide once the evidence is available? In 12 minutes, you can turn a static list of commitments into the beginning of adaptive decision system, right? So wrapping this up, your roadmap should not be a promise that you can predict the future. It should be the promise that you will be able to pursue a clear direction, test those assumptions, evaluate the evidence, and then adjust responsibly. A roadmap is not strategy. It's not a feature list. It's not a contract for the future. It's a tool for connecting strategy, learning, and execution. So stop measuring roadmap success only by whether the organization delivered what it predicted months ago. Ask whether the organization learned, decided, or created value. A good roadmap does not create calendar compliance. It creates decision velocity. Start with direction, focus on the next priority, measure the evidence, make the decision, adjust the roadmap. That's today's 12 minutes. And that's your 12 minutes. If you found value in this, share it with someone who needs to work smarter, not harder. And remember, small efficiencies compound. Find 12 minutes a day and the results take care of themselves. I'll see you in the next episode.